Hello once again after a short break, everyone. I hope that you had a great Christmas and I hope the new year held something good for you. But by the looks of things, it looks like it's probably going to get crazier than the one we just had. So today's video was a long time coming. It's just something that I have always been really annoyed with, but I've never really been, I guess, motivated enough to put it into a video. So today we're going to be talking about the Bechdel test, and if you don't know what that is, I'll just start with a dictionary definition, as things about feminism usually go along. A way of evaluating whether or not a film or other work of fiction portrays women in a way that is sexist or characterized by gender stereotyping. To pass the Bechdel test, a work must feature at least two women. These women must talk to each other and their conversation must be concerning something other than a man. So as you can see, it is not exactly the most pleasant thing to work with. Now let me explain why I don't like it personally, and there's a bunch of reasons why. But the biggest one is the one I will start with before going into stuff about context and ideologies and all that sort of stuff. Let's just talk about creative control. So when you are writing something, there's kind of a mix of things here that you have in your control and stuff that other people can kind of critique you on. And let me explain what I mean by that. So for instance, if you're writing a story and your dialogue just seems to be a bit flat, but there's nothing else in the story that would indicate that you need the dialogue to be a bit flat, and someone comes along and they're like, hey, I just have that to say about your work. You need to improve the dialogue a bit more, make it a bit more realistic for what you're doing. That is a good critique because it just looks at the methods that you're using to portray the stuff that you want to portray, and they're going, hey, you could work a little bit better on that. You can make it flow a bit better. That's good. That's how you improve it. They're not trying to take anything away from you, really. They're just trying to offer some advice to show you how to better express those things that you want to express. Now, when you come towards control and that kind of side, it's more like someone comes along and they're like, hey, you can't have that many men in your story because I don't like it, or the thing that we're using to mark whether this is a good story or not is whether these women have the right opinion, or these women have a particular politics for no reason. It's like stuff from the outside that interferes with the inside of the novel, or the movie, or whatever it is. Good critiques, I mean, there can be good critiques where you say, well, this woman has a weird opinion, why does she have it? Where you're just simply asking that in the context of everything else in the book or in the movie or whatever. So it keeps it in-world, so it's like, well, you're living in this world with this thing and this person has this experience, so it's weird that their character is very inconsistent. So that's an in-world critique that's just going on with the stuff that's, like, inside, well, the stuff that actually matters. With the whole point of the story is to kind of immerse you. They create a world of their own where you enter it and then you think that, well, you feel that it's kind of real, it's happening around you, and then you step out of that world and back into the real world. It closes itself into its kind of bubble where you can step into. That's what the immersion is about. Then you have these kind of outside world kind of critiques where you're taking stuff from real life that doesn't really have anything to do with the story, or just stuff that you personally want changed because of what you believe in real life, and you're failing to kind of leave that at the door, as it were. You're afraid to go, hey, let's just read the creativity that somebody else has written instead of trying to project myself into it. So this is the first problem that I have with the Bechdel test. It just completely takes away any control that you have to creatively move your characters around. It takes away anything to do with what they actually are doing. Why would they maybe have two women who only talk about the man? Maybe there's only 3 characters in the entire thing, and when the man and one of the women are together, they only talk about the other woman, because there's something going on where they have to keep track of each other because they care about each other. Maybe they're all lost on the island or something. You have no idea. Because that context and that little scenario that I've just created about people being lost on an island, these women could be very strong, independent women. And there's this weird kind of thing where people interpret being a strong, independent woman with being an asshole. What if they're talking about the man because the man is one of the women's brothers, or a loved one that they really care about? That's why they're talking about him so much, because they want to find him because they're scared he's in danger. That's the most important thing to them. They're independent and they're strong and they're probably going to rescue him, maybe, but that means they have to talk about him to figure that out. It's very hard to think about other things when your loved one is potentially dead or suffering somewhere. So we can see why this test is just really inconsistent. And sometimes another requirement of this test is that a woman, like at least one woman, must be named, I think. And that just removes even more control, because what if none of the characters are named? because that's just the artistic style. It's just a statement that someone's making, would this work? None of the characters are named, or maybe they just all have fake names or something. Maybe they're just all numbered because of whatever the artistic purpose is. You're removing all of that because you're just refusing to look at the context. And anyway, relying on the Bechdel test, at least for most feminists I'd say, is not even a good thing really, because I'd hazard a guess and say that the movie Showgirls, you know, the one about dancing and burlesque and strippers and all that sort of stuff, very sexualizing towards women, that one passes the test. It does. It has two women that talk about whatever the fuck they want that isn't to do with men. And I would think that you wouldn't exactly want the whole objectifying women thing that you have pretty much everywhere in Showgirls. And that movie Burlesque with Christina Aguilera, I haven't seen it in a while, but I think I remember two women in there talking about something other than a man, so I guess that passes it. And they're all named as well. They all have their own names. A lot of the songs are geared towards the idea that women have this magical power of using their sexuality and being empowered by their sexuality. So you might not like it, but by all accounts, that one seems pretty women-friendly, I'd say. I mean, if we're using that cool criteria of the test and whatnot. Before you say anything, I'm not ragging on the movie Burlesque. I am not too proud to say that I know every single word of every single song on the soundtrack to that movie. And it's kind of just inserting political stuff into something that doesn't have it. I mean, sure, if your work involves critiquing these sorts of things and having these characters go through all of these things with politics and whatnot, that's totally fine. You can put that in there, whatever. But that's really my point. You can choose whether or not you put it in there. I don't see why this should give you an indicator of whether your work is good or bad. Just this test alone. I don't understand why this needs to be a thing. And for the next part, I know what some people are about to say. Historical context of treating women in movies as weird, weak characters and blah 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 blah. I get it. But the whole point of this equality thing is treating everyone like they can have a shot at something, right? So why is there now this attitude of we need to get payback or revenge? Like we need to have these things in place for women that we don't have in place for men. If you really do want this whole equality thing to work out, why don't you just let people have creative control? Because in the past, maybe there were rules that women had to be written a certain way as weak characters. Sure, whatever, I'll take that. But it's not around now. You can make any character that you want, any type of character. I mean, you'll get criticism, sure. Which is why I'm not saying that, you know, the Bechdel test can't be used at all. I'm just saying that it shouldn't be held up like this. You can definitely still use the Bechdel test as one of your own criteria, but trying to act as if it's one that is important for all movies in general is fucking ridiculous. And anyway, the men in the present, as much as you might like to say that they're misogynistic monsters, the men in the present have not really done anything that the men in the past have done that is so-called misogynistic and oppressive and all that sort of stuff. They're just ordinary guys. So why would you take this thing from the past and put it on these ordinary guys just because of their gender? Because, you know, that sounds pretty sexist, doesn't it? It's just one of those things where it's like, it's okay if we do this. Like, if it's a picture with white people in it and it's just white people, then it's apparently not diverse. But if it's all black people, it's suddenly diverse. That's not what the word diverse means. You need to have a bunch of different people. And anyway, who cares? And besides, I find it really hard to believe that there is a bunch of old stories that just, all of them don't pass the test. Like, up until the point that the test was created, none of them did. There's probably a bunch of old ones that do, but by the standards that we have today, they're probably shit. Because maybe, now hear me out, maybe people's tastes just change over time, and it's not something that you should force and stagnate with stupid political opinions that have nothing to do with the context, and you don't even care about the source material. Like, I remember once there was this critique of that show The 100 where a gay character died and then someone was making a big deal about it even though they didn't watch the fucking show. Like, hey, maybe if you watch the show, you'll understand why the character died. Or maybe you shouldn't give a shit about their sexuality. You are the one who is defining them by their gender in this case and limiting them to that. Because everyone else just isn't looking at it. It's not important. Why does it have to be important? Honestly, this whole video is just kind of me working out my frustration because this stuff seeps into everything. As someone who loves to read, it took me a hell of a long time to try and find some authors that were really good, especially when I was in that young adult book phase, where I was just trying to find a good one in that section in the library and I just couldn't find it at all. The closest things that I kind of guess are young adult books that I like are Sally Gardner, and there's this book, I can't remember what the trilogy is actually called, but the first book is called A Crack in the Line, and it's by Michael something. So far, those ones, and maybe something by Darren Shan, I don't know. But it took me a really long time to find something, because it seeps into everything. I made a video a while back about young adult tropes that I really hate because of the social justice angle on them, and I could definitely refer back to that, because that's everywhere. Because it's an important thing to be able to take yourself away from the character. For instance, in 1Q84 by Murakami, the main character, I think you pronounce her name Ayomami or something, she helps this person who runs this shelter for battered women, and they keep talking about how women are the ones who suffer rape and whatnot, and I didn't actually mind that at all. I mean, sure, if somebody said that to me in real life, I would obviously bring up the fact that men go through it too and there's not enough support for men. But in this case, we're not talking about what he himself believes, what the author believes, it's just what the character believes. And I was perfectly fine with that because she had an interesting character and she had a drive and she had this force. And it was just really interesting. So it's not the fact that there are politics in there that I disagree with, because that's completely fine. If a character has that, as long as they're an interesting character and it adds to that, I'm totally cool with that. It's just the fact that there are outside politics that are trying to go into a thing that it doesn't belong in. Something that is escapism for people to explore and be creative, and you don't need to align every single thing to your one view on how everything should be. Put your politics into everything. The entire series of 1Q84, pretty much no one brought up the fact that men have to go through this stuff too, but that was fine because the characters themselves don't have to deal with that question, and they have their own politics because of who they personally are. Interesting characters with rich backgrounds that were really interesting to read. The politics was perfectly fine, and I just read through it and it didn't even cross my mind. And also, again, the context. This takes place in 1984 Japan, very different to where I am now. Very different climate, very different contexts. So that's totally fine. That's a good example of putting politics into it. You're not really inserting in your own politics, you're kind of just creating the characters' reasons to have what they have, and actually bringing it up when it's relevant. I think I have spent too much time on something that I probably could have wrapped up in 5 minutes, but there you go. Welcome to the way I do things.